everyone. Welcome to our video session with Agricycle. Today, we're going to be interviewing Jacob Foss, the COO of Agricycle. But before we get started, we are just going to talk a little bit about the purpose of video sessions and what we do, and then lead into introductions to see who's on the call today. So the purpose of video sessions is ultimately to showcase the entrepreneurs, people who are doing amazing around the world, and ultimately just be able to brainstorm and connect with them and then learn how we can support each other's journeys. I'm going to start with a brief introduction of myself, and then I'll roll call and people can introduce themselves. I'm Shivani, the CEO of Impaction. I also have a job at Chicago Public Schools as a budget analyst, and obviously I'm based in Chicago. Bethany, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Bethany. I'm currently in DC, also working as a budget analyst, but for the federal government. And I'm also, for the sake of this conversation, a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Burkina Faso, so I think there's some overlap with what this organization does and what I was doing when I was in Peace Corps. So yeah, my interest areas are kind of financial literacy and like migrant immigration rights topics.
Very cool. Thank you, Bethany. Lacey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Lacey, and I am an addition to Impaction, and I'm here to help out with social media.
Thank you. John, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm John. I'm from Burkina Faso, and I'm student in China. I'm studying economics here.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And Roger, I know you popped in. Do you want to introduce yourself? Roger, can you hear us? All right, we're gonna keep moving. Okay. Yeah, so ultimately we know, Jacob, I'm gonna give a very brief introduction and you can go into your presentation. We are going to be speaking to Jacob Foss, the COO of Agricycle. Agricycle creates fully traceable and ethical products, empowering over 11,000 rural farmers worldwide. Their commitment is to train majority women cooperatives and source their fruits from smallholder farmers. And Jacob, if you want to go ahead and give like a brief introduction about yourself and then just go right into the presentation. So that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So, hey guys, I'm Jacob Foss, CEO of Agricycle. I've been on the team for about a year, and as we've kicked things off, before that, what got me into the agricultural / international development was also Peace Corps. Bethany, what country did you serve?
Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso, yeah, awesome. So I was Ghana, right next door. For 2 years there, and then I got into supply chain development, which led me to kind of leading logistics and operations for Agricycle Global. Should I share or?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, great. All right, so this is Agricycle. Our CEO, Josh Scheffner. Oops. Can I hide this? There we go. All right. Our CEO is Josh Scheffner. He started the idea 4 years ago on a college trip, trying to create beer out of wasted mangoes, wasted fruit. So a classic Wisconsin approach, just like turn it to alcohol. And so he was on a trip with that and just saw all of the things that they did wrong, just giving gifts instead of teaching skills and just creating dependency instead of creating a solution, basically. So they left with more damage than good. So 4 years ago, he kind of started thinking, well, I got to change this, flip the script and the narrative, and dried fruit was the route he took. And then it's kind of evolved into what it is today. So we empower rural women farmers across the world by upcycling natural food into sustainable, ethical brands. So the problem is 2.8 trillion pounds of food is wasted every year, and it's due to food loss. So 95% of food in Africa is wasted, and the term food loss is what it's defined as, because it comes in the form of before market. So there's not enough technology in the rural areas or preservation techniques, so the food becomes wasted between the consumer and the market. So it's produced fine, and then it's just not bought or it's not used. So 95% of that food just goes to waste. It rots in the field, it rots at market. People go miles to market to try to sell. Maybe they carry 10, 20 pounds of mangoes on their head, and then they can sell half a pound of those. And then they don't want to carry it back, so they just throw it to the side of the road. And so 1.5 billion rural smallholders account for the majority of this loss. So it's affecting an entire food source and over 1 billion people. So that's where we come in. And I'll get into basically what we do, but this is a slide from our website. The dried fruit section is up right now. So we create a network of global farmers. It's actually 35,000 now. The 11,000 was before we entered a few different countries, but we gained 24,000 in Liberia through some partnerships, which was very exciting. So we have 35,000 farmers in the network, and then we have over 3,000 cooperative members, of those women-led cooperative members. So we try to have 75% women because of all the benefits that, first of all, female empowerment, but also women holding money led to, I'm sure you guys know, more money for education, health, food, instead of motorcycles or whatever else, as the stereotypes go. So what we do, we go into these rural areas, we identify the cooperatives either through partnerships from high level, like UN, FAO, or USAID, or we have connections on the ground with some of our employees that have been working in the agricultural development industry for however many years. So this is an example of one cooperative in Uganda. And we go with, on the far left, he was a former food safety trainer for us. So he goes and teaches the women primarily how to transform the fruit all the way from the tree. We wash it, peel it, slice it, put it in the dehydrator safely, cover it with from flies and all of that, and then put it in the dehydrator for a certain amount of time, bring it back, and then package it safely and send it to our pack house. I can talk about the supply chain in a second. And so then these are our first ever dehydrators that were made. So we had our founders from MSOE, which is an engineering college in Milwaukee. And we originally worked with local materials. So you can see the brick here is just formed from digging out of the ground, and then you form them, let them sunbake to dry, and then a little plaster to keep it waterproof. And then basically you just need heat to rise. So there's always an angle of source, and the fruit is down in there, and the heat is just rising up, and then through the airflow and heat, it dries the fruit out. So it's a very simple solution, and that's what we do, is create those simple solutions without electricity to transform waste into opportunity. So we decided that we needed to scale at a faster pace, and it was nice to have the low barrier of the local resources, but to reach as many people as we wanted to reach and have the impact that we wanted to have, we wanted to increase that scale. So this is a simple dehydrator that we designed that it's super light. Those are just plastic trays. You can carry it anywhere. And you can stack them in different ways. So it doesn't always have to be vertical like this. You can stack them side by side to increase the ventilation. Depending on where the sun is at, you can move it, where the other ones were stationary. So it helps us, one, because it has high margins through the partnerships we sell them to, so then we can reinvest that into growing our reach. But it also is one of our favorite things because it helps the women establish credit, and we hook them up to banks. So like SMEP is a large bank in East Africa that has signed contracts with us to distribute over 1,000 of these to buy and distribute them to the women. So the women will connect them to SMEP, and then they establish a bank line, credit line. So they're building credit, and then in one season they can pay back the loan while still making profit. And then from there on out, it's just straight profit. So it's a dream model for us, and we've had all these partnerships down on the bottom that are trying to help us out and distribute them and help front the cost for the women. So here's our Jolly Fruit Co. brand. It started off as Blue Mangoes. So if you've seen any Blue Mangoes reference, that was our original name. And now it's transitioned to the Jolly Fruit Co. We have Party Pineapple, Mango Rama, and Mr. Jackfruit as our three fruits in this line. And then we'll expand to banana, guava, kiwi, and papaya down the line. So it's all natural, single ingredient, no sugar added. We pick them from wild harvested trees, is a saying we like to say, and then we complete the whole supply chain. So from a rural farm in East Africa, all the way through the pack house in Kenya, or shipped overseas to our different fulfillment centers in Reedsburg, Wisconsin, and distributed across the country. We have 3 others with Shopify, Chicago, California, and Pennsylvania. And we have a feature called Find My Farm, as you can see on the package in the bottom left. That's a fully traceable app that you can scan, and it takes you to a website that tells you all the information of where this fruit came from, like to the actual cooperative, culture, and community that sourced it, that processed it. So you can learn the whole journey from who it's impacting, how it's impacting them. There'll be anecdotal accounts, and it's a cool little tool to help feel connected and kind of complete the supply chain. And so Jolly actually means storyteller in certain African languages. And so we wanted to play off the jolly, like fun and happy, but then also our fruit kind of comes full circle and it tells a story. So we wanted to tap on that as well. And so Target and ShopRite are large retail stores that we'll be getting into for the dried fruit. So then our Tropical Ignition is kind of a different brand that we have. It's a charcoal, and we source it from coconut shells and different shells of fruit that are just normally going to waste. So they're left on the side of the road after being sold, or one of our bigger sources is oil producers. So like palm oil, coconut oil, they'll have all these shells left over, not having anything to do with them because they've already taken the meat for the oil. And then we just go and source those, pick them up, bring them to our cooperative members who char them. And then we have a company that's helping us process them into the briquettes. So this is one of our most environmentally focused products because it's combating deforestation at its head. So instead of chopping down trees, you incentivize farmers or whoever is doing this to even plant more trees, but you don't need to cut anything down. Fruit is just falling, and you pick it up, and then you either sell it for the other value of the meat, of the liquid, the coconut, for instance, or then the leftover shell we just take. So that's kind of the idea of all of our products is we won't ever take something that's of value to the locals. We want the waste, basically, the stuff that they've already made the money off selling or they've eaten it, and then it's just whatever's left over. If they can't eat enough mangoes, we'll take those ones that would go to rot. If they've already processed the coconut or drank all the coconut juice and meat, then we'll take the leftovers. So we'll be in hardware stores. Ace Hardware is a big partner of ours for this. And then we also want to develop single burn crates, just like a one-time use, convenient for users as well. Then there's our What the Fruit line, and this is sourced from the Caribbean. Oh, the Tropical Ignition was from Liberia. Sorry, I didn't mention that. The dried fruit is East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and then Tropical Ignition is Liberia, West Africa, and then What the Fruit is our gluten-free, nutrient-rich flowers from the Caribbean and Latin America. So we're sourcing from Haiti right now. There's actually a shipment in the air of 1,000 pounds coming to us, which is exciting. And there's just various fruit flowers that we're trying to design into brands. So red fruit is our leading one right now, but we also want to take coffee fruit. So there's the skins of the coffee that go to waste after you've roasted the nuts. And then they're very nutrient rich, so much antioxidants, and it's either used as cosmetics or you can use it in like smoothies or something. We're trying to develop that as well. So any other fruit that is in abundance and has a wasted byproduct, we try to upcycle it. So this will be wholesale ingredient sale to bakeries and things like that. So touching on some of the impact, we have mainly 3 camps that we reach for. So we have the economic side, which we're able to deliver over 7 times the local daily wage to our cooperative members. So as you can see there, we have a little over 3,000 cooperative members and livelihoods that we're targeting, and we want to see that go exponentially higher. And then the social impacts, 2/3 right now are women in the smallholder farming communities, and over 1,000 hours of training. So we try to train these cooperative members instead of just kind of like telling them what to do. We take a lot of time to teach them so they own it, they know it, and then they can teach it back to us. And the idea is they can teach other communities too. So if another community wants to learn and sell locally even, they don't have to sell to us as long as there's a skill being learned, the economy being stimulated, money being circulated, and benefit being had. That's what we want. Then the environmental, so 108,000 pounds of waste diverted. And then there's some carbon and greenhouse gas numbers as well. And so methane is one of the largest contributors that fruit rot happens with. So trying to eliminate as much methane will help a lot in the long run. And then various benefits from the carbon emissions as well. So kind of methane, greenhouse gas, carbon emissions, things like that is what we try to reduce. So then a little more details. Our direct trade, it helps. So we cut out all middlemen. We have the whole supply chain. It's a term is called vertically integrated. So that means we have one supply chain that everything funnels into, and we control every aspect of it. So prices, we can give up to 7 times the daily wage, as we mentioned, because there's no middlemen cutting it out and no one's exploiting the farmers. We control everything from the natural process of the fruit, the processing, all throughout to the sales. And with the financial success, so they're typically, their wage is $2 a day, and then with how much they can process in the dehydrators per day, they can make $15 per day, which to these people is awesome, as it's over 7 times what they're normally making. So we're very excited we can deliver on that. And then the bank account, as I mentioned, with the credit line, giving them economic freedom and things like that, that a lot of these people didn't think was possible before. So it's very cool to see how excited they get. And then the skills training, we either train them ourselves or we connect them through partnerships to capacity building, maybe Feed the Future or a different branch of USAID. There's a bunch of local NGOs that we're partnering with, all agricultural development focused or economic development focused as well. So here's our team real quick. Some of our team members, not everyone's on here, but Josh is our CEO. Claire's in charge of business development right now. Is our director of East Africa, Patrick. There's me, and then our VP of brands is Jen. She's designing everything, basically, making everything look beautiful. Our salesman, he's in charge of a direct sales, or a route sales company. So he taps into that company so that we can get our fruit in mainly Midwest, Wisconsin, Chicago area, and Minneapolis area. And then Sutton's our CFO. Ashley is our director of impact and our grant writer. And we have Mohammed, who is in charge of West Africa and living in Liberia. And then Joseph's our food safety manager. So he has one of the hardest jobs, making sure we're compliant with everything. So he and I are constantly talking to the FDA, talking to their local branches, and making sure the fruit can get out of Kenya, can get out of East Africa, West Africa, and then it's safe for consumers in America. And then some of our accelerators down at the bottom, Workbench Labs, FabCap is helping us with, that's food and beverage, Wisconsin, so they help with food safety and just kind of marketing food products in Wisconsin and in America. Target Incubator was really helpful. We were there last summer. They hooked us up with a VP of food and beverage who was getting us into the stores, and market testing, product development. They have so many resources that we can tap into, which is great. And then G-Beta is an accelerator mainly throughout the Midwest, just to help businesses grow at the startup phase. So that's Agricycle in a nutshell. Happy to answer any other questions or hit on places that you'd like to talk more about.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. That was really informational. I know that we had a few questions that you already talked about, so I wanted to just ask a more detail-oriented question. So when you're bringing in these new products into like the local communities, what has the response been? Especially because, I mean, you're going into like coffee and like you have a lot of different products that are going in. So what's the overall attraction?
When we're going to like the cooperatives we source it from?
No, ultimately with the cooperatives and like ultimately how are they I guess my question is more about like how are they like being attracted to this, and especially when if you're working in international development, it's like if you're changing the way that their normal behavior is, like there's this level of pushback, right? So
for sure.
Yeah,
you have to be super careful anytime you're introducing a new idea or even asking for a behavioral change. Behavioral change is like the hardest part of any work, really, but development work for sure. So it's nice to have a connection. We always try to not be a person coming from America saying, hey, this is what you got to do. This is going to help you guys out. So it's very much a open dialogue. It's saying, usually it's a local connection, which helps. But then also we say, this is our model. We would love to have you guys on. I think it could benefit you a lot. Are you interested? So it's never like, here's what we do. Take it. It's very much, are you guys into this right away? Do you want to talk further? And if they're not, then we can try to promote the benefits of it and try to help them realize it will help you. But if at the end of the day, they're not interested, then we're not going to force you to do anything. So in terms of like the approach, that's kind of how we do it. It's very open, transparent. Then we sign we tell them pricing and everything right away before they get their hopes up and think it's something else or whatever it is. So contracts are written, which helps them feel more secure. But then in terms of like the training or introducing a new skill, we try to keep it as simple as possible. So we're in the agricultural sector because of that. One, there's so many resources that they have, and that's the whole problem. But they have been doing that their whole life for the most part of the people we're targeting. So there's a lot less barrier in the skills. And then it's really just a matter of saying, all right, you have this fruit, you slice it and eat it. Now it's just put it in a tray to dry, and then we'll buy it from you. So we try to keep it as simple as possible. The charcoal is a whole different thing. That's not simple in any regards. But it's interesting. Some of the people in Liberia have already been trained on turning coconut into charcoal. So just inherently, people figure this out, which is awesome. And then that's just kind of the approach. Keep it as simple as possible and honest, open, transparent.
Yeah, thank you. I was especially really interested in the briquettes because we had social innovation competition. There were so many different types of innovations around briquettes that local communities, especially in East Africa, were implementing. And I just wanted to know, like, how did you all come up with that idea of turning cocoa into briquettes?
Yeah, so originally there was a student at MSOE, the college I mentioned, that a couple of our team members are from. He just came up to our CEO one day and said, hey, I have this idea. I'd really like to run with it. What do you think? And it was turning coconut shells into briquettes. He's like, very interesting. Okay. And then tell me more. So they just had dialogue about it, did some research, and it turned out very viable. And then we went to Liberia through a Mandela Washington Fellowship that we've gotten. And Mohammed, our director of West Africa, met Josh, and that's when the Liberia connection formed. And Liberia has just crazy abundance of coconuts all on the coast, and as is most of West Africa. But Liberia is a country we happen to get into. And then when I went there a few months ago now, we talked to more partners, big NGOs or small NGOs, and they were saying, coconut shells are great, but you also can burn cacao shells, you can burn palm kernel shells. So that's how that kind of just naturally developed. But yeah, just a random student basically saying, hey, this is an idea. And that's sometimes when the best products are made, random ideas being thrown out.
Agreed. That's really very, very cool. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise I can keep talking. Roger, go for it.
I have a quick question. Yeah, it sounds like you all are, quite far along. What's the next company milestone?
Yeah, so sales is basically our next step. Like we're from the product development, from production side, internationally, we're good. We have what we need. Now it's turning domestically, it's turning to America and saying, is this going to work? Are we going to be able to turn this into revenue to keep us going? So we've raised our round, which is great. The money's in the bank, the product is there. Now it's turning to America and saying, are we going to cash in on this Target deal? Are we going to cash in on Ace Hardware? How's our e-commerce going to go? So basically it's sales focus now, because at the end of the day, you need capital to keep anything going for the most part. So that's our biggest thing.
What was it like? Can you go into more detail on the funding and how you guys, connected with investors? Was it all through the accelerator? It seemed like you had a good network there, or did a feisty angel show up, or what happened?
Yeah, it's interesting. Our entire round was raised with Wisconsin investors. So before, I would never have thought Wisconsin would be a home of this huge entrepreneurial hub, or even investors trying to throw around money. I would have thought East Coast, West Coast, that's where you got to raise your round. But yeah, definitely through those accelerators, the Generator Network, G-Beta Network, just leads to presentations. And then you never know which angel is going to be there, venture capital, whoever it might be, is just in the audience and talking to you afterwards and saying, hey, we're interested, let's talk more. And then they always have connections. So like our lead investor got in earlier, and then he obviously wants to see a bunch more money come in because he's committed. So then he led to his network, and it's just getting in the door and then taking advantage of what's behind that door, all the connections you can make.
Especially for startups who are now working into, getting into accelerators and incubators and whatnot. What do you think is what is a piece of advice that you can give to them? What is something that they should prioritize moving forward to get to that next stage and, growing their selective networks and raising a round of funding?
Yeah, I would say spend just as much time early on your company as your network. Maybe more so on your network, honestly, because you can spend all the time in the world. Maybe you have a small team, but you're only going to get so far rather than expanding. And one person could have an entire team in itself that's 5 times the size of yours. You meet that person, they're into what you're doing, you just quadrupled your team. So obviously your idea is important, but you're going to get to a point where you need help, and you need money, you need resources. So just network, take advantage of, there's a lot of networking events that are so aren't really worth your time, but just pursue LinkedIn, reach out to people, grow your network in any way you can. That's the biggest thing I've learned and that I would push. Don't be scared of a no. If someone says no, fine, either try to get them to say yes or just go on unfazed. No's are going to happen. Don't let it set you back at all. Just try to learn from it or just go elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the challenges that Agricycle is facing right now? And actually, what are some of the challenges that you faced in growing this into what it is now?
Yeah, the FDA is always one of our biggest challenges. More so in the past, hopefully, but it'll be every shipment. They're going to inspect the USDA, customs. Every shipment, it's going to be an issue. You never know what's going to happen. Our Kickstarter order was delayed a good week and a half because the FDA just flagged it, and then in the end they didn't do anything about it. Nothing changed. There's nothing wrong with it. They just saw a different product and they held it up. So meeting orders of customers can be a problem because of that. Meeting orders of customers can be a problem because of a million reasons. Our supply chain, production is an agricultural based company, so the weather of first growing the fruit, but then if it's too much rain, you can't dry the fruit really because we don't use electricity. So weather is an issue, political climate of the countries we're in. We try to mitigate that by having multiple ports that we can ship out of, multiple countries that we source our product from. Sales, sales is always a mystery. You never know. Really, they're every aspect of our company is a challenge based on the nature of what we do and just business in general. And being a startup. So until we're really in the flow of things and can count on customers, can count on different sales channels, retail partners, everything is a challenge, which is I love that, but it's also difficult.
when you face these challenges, especially with political climate and weather, like what are some of the things that you do to, I don't know, move your chess piece in a different way and still get still reach goals?
Yeah. So one example would be, well, a couple. Haiti is in a really difficult time right now, politically. The country's in revolution, basically. They're stopping all NGOs from coming through. They're stopping all roads, and not everywhere, but in a lot of places. And so that's where our fruit flour came in. And so the only reason we could get that out was because of basically like a truce over Christmas. Say like, all right, we're sick of fighting you guys. Hopefully you can just like chill and not fight us back. So let's just relax for a couple weeks. And so much business happened in those 2 weeks. So there's random things like that. But in terms of mitigation, like Kenya, for instance, is where we started in East Africa. But then Uganda has a ton of, well, Uganda is where we started. Kenya is where we grew up because it has a port. And then we needed another port right there. So that's why we ventured into Tanzania. So if a port gets shut down, like Guinea, for instance, has had some issues with this port. Their president's just selling it to Turkey because he wants to win the third election, which is unconstitutional. So there's all sorts of things going on like that. And if you're in a country where that's your one means of getting your product out, then what do? So you got to mitigate and mobilize in different areas, different ways. Weather, like if it's raining, you can't dry your fruit, or we don't want to turn to electricity. We did have in one of our dehydrators a way that you could burn, it was a brick kind of structure on the bottom, and then you could burn, like, let's say coconut shells to heat it up, and then that's your heat source. So that was one of our earlier designs. So just thinking of engineering ways like that, you can still achieve the same principle, but ideally you it's shiny at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, are there others in this space who, I mean, may share your mission, especially when dehydrating fruits and, empowering local farmers?
There's a good amount either getting into it or already. I've got like Mavuno Harvest is a company. There's none that have our like fully integrated model. So they're either just in the fruit drying space, but then usually it's not like passive solar dehydrators, which means no electricity. Usually it's like a bigger production. Usually it's not as much focus on the smallholder level. No one has the Find My Farm app that like tells the story, so it's much less community driven. And then like the different brands, like I said, they just focus on the charcoal. I'm biased for sure, but from what we've found, we're the most like impact focused. That's probably very relative, but in terms of like measurements, what we try to put out there, and then owning the whole supply chain too is one of our differentiating factors. So there's probably some that are out there that are doing very similar. I mean, there's definitely some that are doing similar, maybe more similar than I realize, but I think we're pretty unique.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like the Find My Farm app, especially because how are you able to, I mean, track how the supplies go?
Yeah, so back to your challenge question, that's been a big one, logistically figuring that out, because we have, by the end of the year, we'll have close to probably 200 cooperatives that we're sourcing from. And so in order to keep all that straight, one, you got to collect all the data. So we have community surveys that we distribute. Our field officers go and work hand in hand with the communities. We try to get every woman or every cooperative member involved in answering questions, because we'd love to see the baseline where they're at with certain different indicators and then where they're at later. So that's something that we just keep internally, but then some of the more community focused, less personal information is what we put in the Find My Farm app. And so that's anywhere from how they spend the money, kind of where the money is going, coming from, what they're able to do next, all sorts of different indicators, sending kids at school if they're able to see a difference there. Then a lot of stories, interviews, video, and written of what their life is like, basically. And not even, a lot of it's what our impact for sure and tied to Agricycle, but a lot of it we just want to inform people. Like, I think there's such a big information gap. that's one of the big inspirations behind this. Just like learn about this community in Uganda that's like 15 hours away from the capital even, that no one is going to go to. Just check out their story. Awesome people doing awesome things, and no one else is covering it. Like, you're never going to hear about Padibe, Uganda. So that's a big part of it. But then logistically, to get to your question, traceability is basically what it's tied to. So we're working with traceability companies to set that up. So right now we're more so doing it manually, getting the basis of it settled. Like Google Sheets really is kind of how we all can tie into it. But then on the American side, there's QR codes that's how it works. Like, that's how you scan it. So getting that company right, and then tying each different sticker to a cooperative, and then each different sticker of that cooperative to a fruit. And then constantly updating the database that it pulls from of, oh, we have 5 new women now in this cooperative, or we have this different cooperative down the road a little bit. How are they different? What's their story? So it's going to be a constant battle of updating it, but that's one of the features I'm most excited about, just like that education aspect.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's a challenge, but if, like, especially through education, this is going to be huge. I've never seen a model like this. Very cool. Yeah, does anyone have any questions, comments? I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. No? Going one? Twice? Okay.
Well, I got something.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Yeah, go.
So are you guys selling, is the core model humidifiers or the end product? Or the fruit product, like the consuming product?
The end product is the fruit, but then we found a way to include another product in that process. So like selling the dehydrators through those partners is another revenue stream, but it's a means to the final product, which is the dried fruit in that case.
Was the humidifier developed, and I think you kind of answered this, but was that the core tech developed, or was that developed to address an issue in the product life cycle?
Yeah, more so to address the issue. So thinking all this food waste is mainly due because of lack of preservation, lack of technology. What can we do to address that? And so you develop the dehydrator. All right, great. We have this dehydrator. What do they do with this dried fruit now? It's a different product that maybe they eat it locally, great, and they can store it for longer. But at the end of the day, there's no market. People might not even want dried fruit in that area. So the biggest thing in my mind that we offer is the market linkage, because there's so many NGOs that are building capacity. Like, that happens everywhere. That's great. Keep doing that for sure. But you have all these fruit or grains that you've increased efficiency in your harvest now. What do you do with that? And you got to make money to live. You can eat that grain, the same maize bag, for your whole season, but it's great to switch up your nutritional intake and then diversify your portfolio, what you're eating. So then the market linkage is, hey, we've created this technology, or like help them with this technology, and now let's help them make money. So it's basically, yeah, your question is basically the path we went on. So yeah, for sure.
Sure. It's the reason I ask it is so many founders are dealing with the chicken and egg problem, right?
Yeah.
And developing the humidifier, that's not like, oh yeah, just go build a humidifier.
Right.
It's an expensive. I'm assuming just from what I know on the industrial design side, like, it's expensive to produce one of those things. And I guess your final product is definitely the network linkage thing. I think a lot of people often start there without really knowing how to ramp up into that.
Yeah.
So if you could, and I know you touched on it, but just talk a little bit more about, and let's frame it as the chicken egg problem. Like, how did you guys get out of your chicken egg scenario?
Yeah, so we went from more so the grassroots up approach rather than having a network and then going down. So it started from that trip I mentioned back with the 4 years ago, going to a community to try to transform mangoes into beer, which now we actually have a winemaker that we're bringing on a trip with us in Africa to hopefully create mango wine, different wines, but side story. And so we were meeting these farmers, seeing the problem, and then it was really the dehydration model is what we saw as the solution there. And then after that, we're like, all right, we kind of have this solution. We got to think further, and instead of just like helping the people up to a certain point where typically that's where it ends, how do we expand out? So it was really the dehydrator first, the network combined with the market second, and then instead of, we wanted to have all of it set up to, not like the full thing set up because we wanted to get in right away, but we didn't want to say, all right, we have this dehydrator, trust us, we'll figure it out later. It was part of that, but we wanted to like make sure that we could complete the supply chain and figure it out later. So just kind of 1, 2, 3 step. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think, it's always a difficult thing to figure out. How did we actually do this? And of course, when it works, and when it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much so just kind of going with it day by day. Like every month our business is completely different. Like we're constantly evolving and looking back, just like, oh, we could have done so much here, but now we're hopefully doing that now. Or I'm really glad we got this break before. It's put us in a great spot now. So just constantly evolving, which is fun.
For sure. The point about networking is so dead on. Just talk to people. Anyways, thank you so much.
Definitely.
Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, yeah.
So I know briefly like potential issues with political climate and those sorts of things were mentioned, but one thing I know we encountered a lot on the ground in Peace Corps is like there's a lot of good ideas happening, but you can't necessarily export them because of a lot of infrastructure, specifically infrastructure issues. And so I know you're kind of trying to like do that all internally, which is great, but I'm wondering like what sorts of things are being done or how you're thinking about what your role is maybe in terms of advocacy when it comes to ensuring like you will be able to continue to get these products out because governments are investing in infrastructure, and you'll like where your role is kind of between U.S. government institutions and other government institutions, and you're kind of playing in all of these different circles that are really complicated, and there's not a lot of collaboration, which is like an area I'm really interested in, but it's definitely just like not something that's happening. So you may not have like a very specific answer, just like kind of how is the organization thinking about dealing with those things in the future? Is there like a specific plan, or what advice would you give people who are kind of thinking about how to connect those dots?
Definitely. So when I'll go back to even before Agricycle, the supply chain development, one of the ways that we had success was kind of our main lead from the company just like ditched us right away. So we were sitting in Senegal with 0 leads. And we figured, well, we got to start somewhere. So we started with USAID, like perfect bridge between America and the host country, hopefully. And then from there, it's just like every meeting, don't stop until you've had 2 to 3 to 4 other leads from there. So like push whatever angle you can, try to get as many contacts from an initial meeting as you can. So like after 5 meetings, we had 20 to 30 people that, all right, we can reach out to these people now. So that, I mean, always tying back to networking for sure. That's one piece of advice I would have. You're trying to develop something, you're in a country, or even if you're in America, whatever country you're in, just like try to get as many names and contacts as you can. And don't let them say like, yeah, I'll send it to you later, because that'll never happen. That's happened so many times to us. Like, all right, no, you won't. I need that now. And so it might sound like come off as like pushy, but you got to do it if you're behind your cause. But then one thing we do, like in Liberia, for instance, they had a huge push from the Paris Climate Accord. By 2050, they have all of these different greenhouse gas emissions and biodiversity goals. And so working with the government there was a perfect in with the UN and different organizations. They very much can get behind the cause. Like charcoal is illegal. You can't export charcoal out of Liberia. So it's been almost impossible for us to find a carrier that says, no, if you like, actually the semantics behind it is you can't export something that combats or that leads to deforestation, but this is a different charcoal product. So that's had a lot of problems as well. But once we get more known, it'll be easier. But like one of the long-term goals, like high up goals we want to do is have the government be so successful basically that one of the roads in Riversess and Sino are these regions that are completely isolated from the capital, from anywhere else in the country. No one even helps them really because you can't get any trucks there. So a huge goal of mine personally is to be so successful for these rural farmers that the government sees a need to develop those roads and that infrastructure. So like if that happens, that will just be one of the big, like more than any other sales, really, I would be so happy about that. That would just warm my heart. No end. So things like that, like super ambitious, but that would be great to see. That's really the example I can have, just like partnering with different local transportation places as well to hopefully build up that infrastructure.
Transportation is always an issue, like internally. So I was just curious, like how the balancing that kind of like governmental relationship issue is always a struggle. So I was just curious what sort of thoughts that you were thinking about for future endeavors. Ideally, it will all self-reinforce, but everyone has different interests that they bring to the table, and not all of them are as productive or good for the general public as we'd maybe like. So it's just like something to think about.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
So we have 5 minutes left. We just have 2 more questions, real quick. The first one is, how can we help support your cause?
Yeah. If anyone in the Impaction Network is in any of the countries we're at, or has a connection to organizations that are in the countries we're at, or even nearby countries, so we can, and we're looking to expand to West Africa later down the line once we have more things in a row. But any connection to a cooperative that'd be interested, any connection to a transportation partner that'd be interested, logistics partner, a very specific one, we're looking for a machine that processes the briquettes. We have a connection right now, but we're always open to new ideas. Any idea of a fruit that in any country, this would be applied globally to a fruit that's got tons of waste right now, and so much abundance, and something's not being used. Just like knowing that, first of all, and then our team can hopefully think of a solution, or if you have a solution and an idea, be great. Like a go-getter and got it. Good. I'd love to hear about that go-getter. Like for instance, the pineapple peels have bromelain in them, which is an extract that is very touted in the nutritional industry right now. So like even if it's a pineapple peel, which we think you can't eat that and no value can be of that, there might be, you never know. So capacity, partnerships, products, really anything. I just love to learn about what other people are doing too.
Yeah, I mean, those are more of like the high level stuff, but is there anything lifestyle wise that we can help with? I mean, you guys are working towards environmental conservation. Is there anything that you would suggest that we do even in our daily lifestyles to help further your mission?
Oh, that's a good question.
We're all about the small.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just like finding different ways to use something is always super helpful. Like a plastic bag, don't just like throw it away, like use it next time, or I don't know, just small things like that, as I'm sure you guys are aware. Reduce, reuse, recycle, all those aspects. Lend a helping hand. Like don't just put your head down, walk to a store, like look around, see if someone needs help carrying something, or that's not really like our business related, but I'd like to see that. That'd be cool. So I can ask that personally. Just like help an old lady carry her groceries or something. Just be aware. Be aware of your surroundings and don't just like take in the journey too. Don't just like go from A to B. See what can happen in between.
See what can happen. I see what you did there. Okay. And then one last question. What's one piece of advice that you would like to give our community of innovators and entrepreneurs?
Run with your idea. Don't let, like, people are going to say probably that's dumb, or they're not going to support you or whatever. But if you believe in what you're doing, just go for it. Try to get like-minded people, or even maybe not like-minded people, but people focus on the same goal. Like our team is so not like-minded. We're so diverse in every different way, but like we're united around the cause. So just push for it. Like I talked about no's earlier, just like a no is a different way to get to a yes. Like just be persistent, be respectful but pushy.